Alright everyone, hello. We're going to start working today with process control charts, and I just thought I'd give you a little preview of how everything's going to be looking like once we're all finished. And we're going to be able to create our own model where we can tweak and change everything like that we want in here. So let's get started. We're going to start doing this from scratch. So I'm just going to open a new sheet over here. Okay. So for the purposes of this exercise, I've decided to select a sample size of 7 and also seven number of observations for each sample. So let's go ahead and start with the titles of our table. I clicked on A2 and I just typed in the word samples, and underneath I'm going to number them 1 through 7 like this. Oops. There we go. And over here, I'm going to put the title. Again, I just click on the cell and you can just start typing in. So now we have number of observations and also 7. So let's go ahead and number these just like we did with the table to the left. And this is pretty much the setup of how our table is going to look like. So what I want you guys to do is just drag from A1 all the way till the end of where the of H9, where the 7th sample and the 7th observation meet, and go over here and where you see this little box or like a window looking like, take the click on the arrow pointing down and then click on all borders. Now, we want this title to really encompass the whole span of the table. So click and drag from all the way from B1 till the end of the table, which is H1. And go over here in the Home tab and click where it says Merge and Center. Now that we have the header for the observations and for the samples, let's go ahead and label them. And let's go ahead and color them appropriately. So let's maybe put some orange here and also here. And for the subgroup, let's do a light gray. Again, I'm just clicking and dragging all the way. And once everything is highlighted, I just use this little paint bucket thing to color the cells. All right. So before I start, I want to emphasize the intuition behind this. Let's say that for matters of this example, we're working with a company that does chips, and in this example, we have on the left, on the sample column, seven different types of chips. We have chip type 1, chip type 2, chip type 3, and so on. And what we're going to do is, this company wants to evaluate let's say the weight of all of these chips by selecting 7 randomly of each, so that they can test for data that goes out of range or out of control. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a random set of numbers. Let's say till 200. No, 100. Okay. Now you don't need to do this part. I'm just adding some random numbers so that we can work with this. Okay, there we go. All right. You will be given this data in the assignment, and you'll have to manually put it into your table. Just for these purposes, I just chose some random data. So we're going to work with this. Now that we have the data perfectly aligned with the sample and each observation, what we need to do is we need to work on getting the range and the average or the mean of all the observations for each sample. So next to the 7th observation title here, we're going to add another column title. It's going to be called range, and it's going to be in cell I2. Let's give it some color, a light gray, and be consistent. And okay, so for this cell, I'm going to introduce to you the first formula that we're going to be working with, and it's going to involve a combination of two. The range is the difference between the largest and the smallest value of observations for each sample. So instead of having to look for the biggest and the smallest and then just subtract them, I'm going to plug in a formula in Excel that will do that for me. So we start by typing in the equal sign, and then we're going to type in the word max, open parenthesis, and once you do that, you're going to click on the first value on the first observation of the first sample, which is in cell B3, and drag all the way till H3. Close parenthesis, and then you want to add the minus sign, and then you're going to type in the word min, and then open parenthesis. And then you're going to select the same set of data one more time. Again, from B3 to H3, close parenthesis, and then you can hit enter. So the intuition behind this formula is that, as you can see, max stands for maximum, and what Excel is doing, it's picking up what the highest number of all of these values is, and then over here with min for minimum, it's picking up the lowest one, and it's subtracting them so that we can get the range. In this case, it's 93. Now the cool thing with Excel is that we can just go to the bottom right corner of the cell where we just worked with and click and then drag. Once it becomes like a cross, you can just drag it down. And the reason why is because we don't want to repeat the process of typing in the formula for each of these cells. When we drag and drop, we make Excel automatically reformulate the formula by selecting the appropriate number of observations for each sample. So it's much faster. Next, what we're going to work with is we're going to get the mean for each of these, for all the observations for each sample. So let's type in means next to ranges, and let's add some color again. Now, again, we're going to use another formula. So type in your equal sign. This time, just write or type in the word average, which is the same thing as mean. Open parentheses, and then you're going to select the same range of data that you used to get the range. Close parentheses, and hit enter. Again, we don't want to write the formula for all of these cells, so we're just going to go to the bottom right corner, and once the mouse becomes like a cross, just click and drag down till the last sample, number 7, and the formula will just populate immediately. Now that we have all the data that we need in here, highlight it all from A2 till J9. And what you want to do is go over here to the little box, and we want to make it part of like the table format that we have here. Now that we have all the range and all the means, what we need to do is get the average of each. So I'm going to add a little title here, averages. And once you have this, I did this in H10. And once you have this cell selected, go over here and align this to the right with the button here under the Home tab. Let's color this in gray as well. And now we're going to get the averages with the same formula we used for the means for both of these columns. So once you go to the very last cell under the last value of ranges, next to averages in cell I-10. We're going to type in the equal sign again, and we're going to get the average. So we're going to type in the word average again, open parenthesis, and we're going to click on the first one, and holding the mouse, you're going to drag all the way till this last sample. Close parenthesis, and hit enter. What you want to do now, instead of doing the same for the means, we're just going to, again, use this cool feature of Excel to make it reformulate it for us. So what it's doing is just passing the whole formula to the right so that we don't have to write it down again. Okay? Now let's highlight these 3 new cells, and let's add the table formatting with the window button again. And since we're going to come back to these 2 data or values that we just got, we're gonna let's add some color to these 2 cells. Let's do yellow. Okay. All right. Now that we have the averages for our ranges and the average for our means, what we're going to do now is we're going to calculate the upper and lower control limits for the range and for the mean so that we can construct both graphs. But in order to do so, I'm going to add 3 new metrics that we're going to need in order to calculate this. So I'm just going to type this right under here under cell A11. So I'm just going to type these 3 in. A2, D3, and D4. Now, in order to, we will need all 3 values in order to calculate the limits, and you will be given the table or chart that has all these values. So the first thing we need to know is that our sample size is 7. So let's go and check out our chart. Okay, so these are the 3 metrics I just typed in, A2, D3, and D4. And all we need to do is just look for the sample number or a size, which is 7 in this case, and we'll just manually put in the values for each metric. So for example, for the first one, A2, sample size 7, it's 0.419. Let's go look for D3. 0.076. And lastly, D4, 1.924. Some of you may have this issue and some of you may not, but Excel sometimes automatically thinks that instead of putting 1,924, it's assuming that I'm actually typing 1,924. If you get this problem, the easy way to fix this is just hit delete, and once you are in the cell, go over here under the number box here and hit the percentage style. So what you're doing here is you're formatting that any value in this cell will be presented as in a percentage sign. So we're going to write the value again, but in percentage. So instead of being 1,924, it's going to be 192,4. Hit enter. And now that we do have the right numbers, let's go back over here and let's make it again a number formatting instead of a percentage. And now you can see over here the value is correct, 1,924. Now what we want to do is we want to make this look like a table. So let's highlight it all. Let's use the borders, all border button, highlighting the 3 metrics, A11 to A13. Let's align all of them to the right, and let's add some of the color here. Okay, perfect. Now these are the 3 metrics we're going to be needing for calculating the control limits. So I'm going to start making a box for the control limits for the range. And I'm right now under D11. So I'm going to manually type in UCL-R and right underneath LCL-R. Okay? And alright, so let's calculate the upper and lower control limits for the range. Now you should have your formula, but I'm going to go ahead and go through the process so you can see how to plug in the formulas here in Excel. So next to the upper control limit cell, I have highlighted or clicked on E11, and that's where I'm going to type in the value by using a formula. So type in your equal sign, and the way to calculate the upper control limit is by multiplying D4 times the averages of the range. So once you have the equal sign, just click on the value of D4, which is in cell B13, and then type the asterisk on your keyboard, which stands for the multiplication sign, and then again click on the average of the range, which is in cell I10. Once you've done so, just hit enter, and there's your result. Now we're going to calculate the lower control limit, and for this one, instead of D4, we're just going to use D3. Same thing, put the equal sign, click on the D3 value, asterisk, and then the range, average of the range, and hit enter. Now that we have all our values, let's go ahead and highlight these 4 cells and do the same formatting we did with our 3 metrics over here. So go back to the All Borders button, and just having the 2 titles on the left highlighted, let's make them orange again and align them to the right. Now that we have the control limits for the ranges, what we're going to do now is we're going to calculate the control limits for the means. So I'm going to just type this in, UCL X and LCL X. Okay. Alright, and now for the formula to calculate the control limits for the means, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply A2 times the average of the ranges and then add it or subtract for both of this. So let's start with the upper control limit. We'll type in your equal sign, and the first thing you want to do is click on the average of the means, which is in cell J10, and since this is the upper control limit, you hit the add sign and then open parentheses, and then we want to click on the value of A2 asterisk and multiply it by the range, average of the range, close parentheses, and then hit enter. In this step, it's really important that you put parentheses inside this multiplication, because otherwise it would first add J10 to B11 before multiplying to I10. So it's very important that you create the parentheses so the right values multiply each other before you add the other cell. So let's calculate the lower control limit now. Type in your equal sign and select the average of the means, cell J10, and in this case we're just going to subtract instead. So open parentheses, and again A2 times the average of the average of the range. Close parentheses and hit enter. Again, let's just format this small 4x4 2x2 table. All borders, and the titles with orange and align to the right. Okay. Now we've really finalized everything. We have everything that we need to calculate our graphs. But lastly, in order for Excel to be able to pick up the information neatly, in order to convert it into a graph, we need to create a set of tables, one for the range and one for the means, so that Excel can pick up the data and create graphs out of them. And before I create those two new tables, what I want to do is I'm going to highlight all of these values over here and look for where under the general box here, the button that says decrease decimal. There's just too many decimals here. 3 is just enough. And let's go ahead and do the same over here. We don't need anything more than 3 decimals. Okay, now we can start constructing our 2 tables. Okay, for the first table, we're just going to duplicate again the first column, which is samples. But instead of typing in 1 through 7 again, I'm going to introduce a new concept which is called cell referencing. Under samples, just hit equal sign and select the cell that we want to reference, which in this case is going to be A3. Hit enter and go to the bottom right corner, and all you need to do is just click and drag all the way till the last one, the 7th. And what it's doing, it's picking up the value, as you can see over here how it changes when I moved from cell to cell. That is just picking up the value already existing in this initial column. Now, since we're first constructing the table for the ranges, let's create a second column here that's going to be called ranges. And we're going to do another cell referencing, and in this case we're going to reference the cell I3, which is where the first value of the ranges is. Hit enter, and again click and drag all the way down till the 7th sample. On the next column, we want to create a column where each range can be next to its average, which is down here. So we're going to just cell reference this cell right here so that it shows next to every cell. So let's create the title here, average range, and underneath let's cell reference the cell I10 where the average of the range is. But in this case, what we want to do before hitting enter is hit F4, and you'll see how these dollar signs come right in front of the column letter and the row number. Hit enter, and then drag all the way down. As you can see, locking the cell when we reference it allows us to drag all the way down, and every cell is still going to pick up the value back from I10 instead of making it go even further down to these blank cells where there's no values at all. Next, we're going to do the same procedures with the upper and lower control limits. So let's create the columns. And let's cell reference the upper control limit. Let's hit F4, and we want to lock it and then drag it all the way down. Lastly, we want to do so as well for the lower control limit. And we want to reference the lower control limit cell, which is E12. F4 and drag down. Okay. Now our table for the range is complete. Let's just highlight it all and click here again in all borders. Let's make the headers of the table orange and this first column gray. Right here. You can feel free to select any colors you want. Now lastly, let's do the same table but for the means. So again, I'm going to start with the first column, samples. And again, I'm going to reference this first cell, A3, so that we can pick up the values that are already existing instead of typing them again. Now, just like with the range table, we want to select all the values, but for the means. So let's click on this new header and type in means, and right underneath it, let's cell reference the first mean value, which is in cell J3. Hit enter, do not lock, and drag all the way down. You can see that these are the same values right here, but we don't need to type them in manually. And in fact, you must not type them in manually. You need to use the cell referencing and all these formulas. And the reason why is because at the end you need to feel free to change this data and make it be connected to the final graphs so that they change as you change the data. So as we move along in the table, let's go and make another column here. It's going to be called average means. And we're going to cell reference only this one cell. So we're going to lock it. So type in your equal sign here and click on the average of the means, which is on cell J10. Lock it with F4 and hit enter and drag down. And see how the value just repeats itself. Let's add the upper and lower control limits now. Cell reference, the upper control limit value over here in E14, and lock it. And lastly, we want to do the lower control limit for X. And we'll cell reference the lower control limit value in E15. Lock it, hit enter, and drag down. Now let's highlight the whole table for X. Let's add the all borders button, and let's make the first subgroup column in gray as well. And now we've had all the values that we need. Now we can create the graphs. So let's go ahead and highlight the first data that we need for the range for the R chart, which is the ranges. What we're going to do here is we're going to highlight all the cells in this table except the first column. We're going to leave the samples column behind unhighlighted, and we're going to highlight all of the rest. Once these are highlighted, we're going to go here to insert next to the home tab and go to the lines chart button and select the first one. And your chart will come up like this. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so it fits right here in the exercise. Okay. And the next thing you want to do once you do get your graph is click on where it says chart title and highlight it and change it to R chart. And we still needed to get the samples column in, as it's also referenced right here from 1 through 7 for each specific point in our graph. Now let's do the same thing, but for our X chart. Again, highlight all of the cells, leaving the samples column behind. And let's go ahead and to the Insert tab again under Line Chart and select the first one. Okay, there we go. Now, again, click on the chart title, highlight it all, and change it to the appropriate chart title name, which is X chart. We're dealing with all in this graph / table. We're dealing with all the ranges of the observations, and here we're dealing with all the means of the observations. And just the same way as in both, we have the upper control limit in gray over here, the lower control limit in orange or yellow. The mean of the ranges is in red in this table, and the mean of the means is in red in this table. And all the individual values for the ranges are here in this table for each sample, and over here we have all of the values for the means in blue as well, in this blue line right here. So if you have set up all of the formulas accordingly and well, like I did in this exercise, you would be able to modify any of this data in the table of observations, and it will impact in real time the two graphs. So let me show you an example. And this is just to test that you did the formulas okay in your model. So you go to the first observation of the 7th sample, and let's change the number from 23 to something outrageous. Let's say it's 300. Okay. Now you can see how it instantly is changing all of the tables which feed then the graphs, and now the graphs also have changed accordingly. You can see right here how in the 7th sample it just skyrocketed all the way till the top, leaving the upper control limit. Funnily enough, though, it still wasn't enough to get outside of the 3 sigma level for the mean. So if we want to make sure that it does get outside on the X chart, we can just make this number even more outrageous. Let's say 1,000. And there we go. Completely off the charts with the R chart, and pretty above the sigma line for upper control limit for the X chart as well. And now you have completed your exercise. So just remember you'll have different set of data in this area, so you have to manually input it, but the rules are still the same. You have to calculate your range and then your means, calculate the averages for each, select the appropriate metrics, because A2, D3, and D4 are dependent on your sample size. You will not have 7 and you will not have 7 as your sample size or observations. You'll have different numbers, so you have to calculate these accordingly. And remember to set up your tables correctly and locking the cells that need to be locked when you do cell referencing. Well, good luck everyone.